Dagda agus tá Fulcherov is mission Scéalaí Beag. Hello, and you're very welcome. I'm the little storyteller. I have the privilege and the honor and the delight to be part of a very active and engaged online community to talk about the deity, the ancient Irish deity that I work for, um, the Dagda. There's a lot of kind of information around him, which I'm very kind of grateful for, and I'm able to kind of dive back through our ancient stories and explore ancient lore, and then bring those stories forward in new retellings to make it more accessible to people in a current environment, shall we say. It's why I refer to myself as the little storyteller, in fact, the Scéalaí Beag. Dagda is known as on Dagda More, which is the great or big Dagda, which is why I go by the little storyteller. So I am his little storyteller. Um, I'm trying to do my best to give honor to an ancient Irish role known as the bard. And so within ancient culture and Irish society, there was actually a caste who were specifically responsible for memory, responsible for like the telling of tales. It wasn't just down to entertainment. It was actually recording the deeds and the greatness, and also passing on the education through the medium of story. And in that age old, the moral of the story is. Um, so there's a lot of stuff that we have about the Dagda, which I'm very, very grateful for. And a question has actually come up from my community in the Facebook group I host, with known as the Dagda's Hearth. And it's specifically following on from another previous video I did about what the Dagda might be saying, or what, like, people can take from our lessons and the teachings and the stories of the Dagda in our current days of challenge facing into the COVID-19 global pandemic issue. So the question that was presented is really just to kind of talk about the difference between the Dagda's version of abundance and plenty, and buying into like scarcity, and maybe influencing by like the current kind of expectation around what is it that fulfills us, what is it that we need. So it's a really good question, and it's why I wanted to kind of pop on and do a video about it, because as ever I can type a heck of a lot and kind of give large kind of responses, but sometimes getting the intonation, getting the visual and the audio experience can pass over a little bit more information in regards to the emotional impact involved. And that is something that we should always be aware of and not kind of take for granted. The world is kind of facing into a difficult time, and there's a lot of fear out there. And there's a lot of different kind of, depending on your belief, depending on your energy structure or your belief around energy work, um, there's kind of resonances that we all kind of work with our daily life. Like, we are biomechanical organisms, and so we actually, like, it's measurable. We generate heat. Like, touch your skin, you're generating a certain amount of heat from the biomechanical organism that is running through you, the biological processes, as it were. And so there is a constant creation of energy within us. Um, from my personal perspective. And I think when people approach that with a certain consciousness, a certain awareness, they may become aware of high energy states, low energy states. And we talk about it a lot. Some people um, like suffer from depression. I suffer from depression. And when that mood is on me and when I'm in that kind of mental state, my energy levels plummet, and it leads to a lot of apathy. You're unable to move. But in the opposite side, when I'm in a joyful state, when the levity and the fun is high, the energy is abundant, and we kind of run around and we have all of the great times. And then when the ideal is, of course, is to avoid the lows and the manic highs and kind of exist somewhere within the middle. um I think, from my opinion, fear can be a bit of a fear can be healthy. Let's be fair. It's something that encourages us to be self-aware, to be cautious of ourselves. It's a self-defense mechanism. It's a protection. So we're biologically and evolutionarily evolved to watch out for threat, to be aware of threat, and to react to that in a way to survive. That is why we are here today, because in our biological programming, there is this survival instinct. And one of those aspects of it is fear. The danger, though, is when we constantly try and focus on fear, or we're constantly driving our decisions, our directions, or our energy in line with fearful ideals and fearful experiences. Now, I'm not saying just walk it off and don't be afraid. That's ridiculous. Fear is, as I mentioned, a very important function for us as human beings to survive. but we cannot allow ourselves, or we should not allow ourselves, to exist in a constant state of fear, or allow that particular energy resonance to be what drives our thoughts, emotions, and our actions. And that's where the question, I think, comes from my community, this idea of scarcity. Now, we exist in a predominantly capitalist world, and having studied economics in like ages ago in school, you have the old supply and demand graph. And so when supply is like demand is very high and supply can't keep pace with demand, that's when, scarcity occurs. And then when scarcity occurs, pricing changes to move with scarcity. And this is one of the functions of economic commerce and capitalism in around the world. Now, I'm not anti-capitalist. I think there is um, a healthy balance again there that needs to be maintained. Enough to support everyone with their basic requirements, but then also enough to generate impetus and innovation. As an entrepreneur, I think it's important to be able to have those kind of ways to go forward and to push yourself forward. I run the Irish Pagan School, co-founder with my partner. The elanotter.net is our merchandising brand. My own brand is Scéalaí Beag, where I provide my stories and my retellings, and I do tour guides, all of which is a function of me providing the services that I can, but it's also to exist within our commercial environment that we have. The thing is, we have to be very careful of the mindset around that. If we buy into the idea that scarcity is the main drive for everything, then all of our thoughts processes, all of our emotional influences are being dictated by that scarcity, that belief, that fear that there isn't enough. Because that's what scarcity really is. It is that there is not enough, you know? Whereas a change in mindset, a change in approach, looking for different solutions, being open to expressing um, alterations in our habits. So human beings in some function have existed for millennia. And I think it's important to make sure that we are aware of that. It's not a case that this current challenge, this current kind of time is going to be the apocalypse, the end of everything. I see all the memes going around and people are like, oh, my apocalypse attire, I thought it'd be more in lines with like the Resident Evil movies or whatever else. And now it's actually me in baggy trousers or lounge wear, as I refer to it, and socks and jumpers. Um, so there's a lot of kind of cultural media and information that's being put into that. And part of it is because of fear, but this is not the end of the world. you know Hopefully it's a wake-up call to a lot of people that there is significant failures in every governmental system all around the world. No one is getting it right 100%. Some are managing it better than others, some aren't managing it at all, and it's horrific to see how that's impacting on the most fragile within our communities. Every day there are new death tolls, which is terrible, absolutely terrible, because large chunks of it could have been prevented. And not just by community-based programs like social or physical distancing and self-isolation, because that's community looking out for each other, but by government standards, by having better social circumstances, by having better support for those in need. All of this is hugely, hugely important. And hopefully, again, this is not the end of the world. Hopefully it's the end of a current view or an expectation of what our world is and what our world can be, where we don't have people at risk, where we don't have homeless people, sleeping in car parks to make sure that they're staying 6 feet apart, or mass graves. Speaking as an Irish person who still recognizes the cultural trauma on my island of the Great Famine in 1850s, like mass graves, I can drive within an hour's drive, less than an hour's drive from my house, and go to a famine grave. And it is just a large open field, and we know that there are hundreds and hundreds of bodies just there because of what happened during that time. And I'm seeing the news, I'm seeing the media now, and we're back at mass graves. And it's horrifying. It really, really is horrifying. But it's also a wake-up call, or should be a wake-up call, that we could be doing fucking better for everybody. Now, to drive it back to the question, the idea of scarcity, the fear involved with scarcity, there is not complete scarcity. Like, it's not a case where, in some cases, like certain luxuries, certain items, certain kind of requirements are in scarce supply. Like when we look at the impact of medical professionals not having enough personal protective equipment to do their fucking job, all the while there are certain kind of governmental bodies involved which are giving themselves hazard pay, or looking after their own particular needs, or the private hospitals getting kind of large payments in Ireland. There was a large kind of notice about the government having made arrangements and deals with the private hospitals to take control, to allow for more hospital facilities to be available. Of course, now we know that there's a couple of million worth of deal or payment that the Irish people, the taxpayers, are going to have to pay to make sure that hospitals, the people who run these hospitals, get their payment for it. Now, again, nothing wrong with being paid for the service you provide, but there has to be some kind of understanding of like what is the truth of it. Like, we're being sold this social ideal, and it's not factually correct. It's still being run by the capitalist commercial machine. Anyway, not to go completely off topic, um, scarcity, this idea that there isn't enough, and the Dagda and how that applies. So the Dagda, the stories we have of Dagda, is one of the main magical tools that he has is this cauldron that came from one of the four great cities of the Tuatha Dé Danann, known as Murias. And this cauldron is known as the undry cauldron, in that it's always kind of forthcoming. That literally what it actually says in the text. There is one sentence that it says about this particular cauldron, which is that no company ever went from it unsatisfied. That's all it says about the specific cauldron. But when we kind of explore more into the ancient structures, and we explore into the cultural kind of context of that, within the ancient book of Irish laws, there was a actual set down agreements and understandings around hospitality. So if someone came to your house, you would feed them. You'd make sure that they would have a safe place to sleep and a meal to keep them sorted. And they were your guests. Now, the guest was also responsible for proper etiquette and proper balance. There's one segment in the Book of Laws where it actually says a free man under hospitality can expect no more than 6 pints. So essentially that they're your guests in them. They're in your house. You host them, and they're allowed to have a couple of drinks. That was part of the culture. And of course, back in the early days of pre-irrigation and pre kind of water kind of cleansing processes that we have today, beer was actually healthier to drink than the water from the rivers in some cases, because beer is fermented and the bacteria have actually destroyed a lot of the kind of harmful kind of stuff that would be in it. And so it was very common that was the standard. That's what you drank. It wasn't out of any culture of intoxication or anything like that at all. It was actually, that's just what you drank. We have since come a long way from there. But within the laws, it would say that a free person was not allowed no more than 6 pints. So they can have 6 pints, but not too much. When we look at the Dagda stories himself, there's a part where he is beholden under these rules of hospitalities by a Fomorian bard who's taking advantage of him and is taking a third of his meal every day. And the Dagda is not getting a proportionate amount of meal in keeping with the effort and the labors that he's putting in service to his tribe. And so there's an element of that kind of, you're supposed to get what you deserve for the work you put in. And this is kind of where I'd loop it to the answer that I would put forward for this community question. Everyone is entitled to have enough. You should 100% be accepting and taking what you deserve, but your portion needs to be in keeping with the efforts and the labors that you're putting in. And if I was to kind of parse that into an answer to the cultural context where we are in this COVID-19 world, everyone is now remotely working, working in different ways. There are people who unfortunately are losing their jobs because, they're not able to work in those ways. But there's also all these people, frontline people in essential services, medical professionals facing risk every single day, risking their life literally because COVID will kill. This COVID strain, this COVID-19 will 100% kill. The death tolls are there every single day. And anyone who is facing into those services is 100% putting themselves on the line, which I have a huge amount of regard for. And so their effort, their labor, and should be recognized with appropriate rewards, appropriate recompense for the effort that they're putting in. And so we have issues with, the healthcare services, HSE in Ireland, where their medical professionals aren't being recognized. There's no financial support for them in these difficult times. There's no kind of, arrangements on that. We still have people who, as I said, governmental individuals paying themselves hazard pay because they're still functioning within their role. But it's not trickling down. Like this whole idea of trickle down economics is non-functional. It's not getting down to the people who actually need it most. And so taking from there this idea that your portion needs to be in keeping with the effort you're putting in, the other side of that is that there are people taking more than what they're entitled to, what there is a fair share in honest, in my opinion. Like we have seen so many stories of people hoarding stuff. Like they go out and they mass bulk buy a whole lot of hand sanitizer that they would never use themselves. So why are they buying it? Why are they kind of doing this? In some ways, it's an innocent awareness. Maybe they bought into the fear and the scarcity, the fear of scarcity, and that fear is driving them to make these irrational decisions. But unfortunately, there are others who see scarcity because of the programming, because of the economic kind of, you know, education and the world that we live in. They see it as an opportunity. You know, when the demand outstrips supply, prices increase. And so if a person can, like, control the supply by, buying up a whole lot of stuff, then they can alter the demand requirement and the price point. And so we've seen some circumstances where that has been reported to local law enforcement, and some local, governments have been able to clarify their legal standpoint on hoarding in these times of difficulty, and been able to make very clear decisions. And I've seen some seizures happening, which is great, and redistribution of these supplies. Um, but it's a tricky kind of state to be in, and so I don't want to kind of ramble on too much in regards to this. Obviously, I'm a very, very passionate person about this difficult time, and I think we are all facing into it. And every single one of us should be doing whatever we can to look after ourselves and to look after our families and our close communities, even if they're not so close, even if they're physically distant, doesn't mean they're socially distant. The Irish Pagan School is hosting Live at Five events where we just open up some kind of cameras, we let people come in, and we have conversations, like we have dialogues to just make sure we're checking in with each other or talking about particular topics that we're passionate on. You know, that's an important part, and it's our intention to give the right kind of energy to acknowledge that the world is abundant. It really is. Like, there is more around us than we sometimes realize. Even in our community, one of the members of our community quite recently has missed out on a couple of sessions, and I was missing him, but he popped in there yesterday, and he said the reason why he'd missed the sessions was he'd literally just cultivated the land at the side of his house to grow green beans, to grow flowers, to grow plants, to grow, like, I think it was tomatoes as well. He's actually moving to an agricultural solution to supply food for his family, and also engage his children, bring his sons out to actually get them to change the land with him. That is fantastic. That is an amazing achievement. It's a beautiful kind of thing to see. And so there isn't the scarcity that people believe of. There might be scarcity in particular things or certain requirements, but if we are willing to approach it in the right mindset, if we're willing to kind of change our perspective on things, there's a lot more that each of us could be doing for ourselves and for our families. So to wrap it all up, I would say be gentle, be careful, and think along the lines of the Dagda, because for me, everyone is entitled to have what they deserve in keeping with the efforts that they put in. So someone who isn't pulling their weight doesn't require to have as much as someone who is. And sometimes those will change. Sometimes the world will change again, and technical professionals are going to be the ones leading us into a new world. The programming kind of people, like bringing us forward with new technological developments to help enhance us on this planet or to get us off this planet. In which case they're going to be the ones doing the most work, and they should get the portion in keeping with their work. But I think we need to not buy into the fear. But I think there's a lot to be said for a cautious approach. Fear is an element of keeping us alive, as I've mentioned at the start, but it can't be the state in which we exist all of the time. And so, think of yourself, but also think of yourself as part of a community. If you're taking more than what you deserve or more than what's in keeping with your proportion for the effort you're putting in, you may be denying other people what they need. You know, we have people mass buying like hand sanitizer, mass buying personal protective equipment, and then medical professionals on the front line don't have the stock to actually be able to secure themselves. I've seen horrible media stories of people like wearing bin liners in and around a hospital because there's not enough personal protective equipment for them. So I think, again, not to kind of get completely off topic, I could go right way back because I'm very sensitive to it and I'm very passionate about this. I think our world is changing, and it's good that we're changing. We're realizing where the holes are in all of our systems and our services, and we need to improve off the back of that. But we also need to be looking at what is balanced, what is like, reciprocal, healthy, organic kind of flow for ourselves and our positions and our communities. So I do hope that answers my community members' questions or at least touches on it. Um, I will try and do these as much as I can. So if you have any other questions linking to my perspective on things, or linking it to the Dagda information that we have, the Dagda stories, I'd be happy to do my best to kind of answer for you. So you can pop it in the comment below, or if you're on Facebook, you can look at the Dagda's Hearth group where we specifically talk Dagda stuff. So Gaurav Mahagas, thank you very much. August Longafo. Goodbye.